Best Book Bits podcast brings you Ramita Anand, teacher, educational mentor, founder of Elevate RA, a platform of empowerment for young girls to unleash their power, and the author of the book Girl Elevated. Ramita, thanks for being on the show.
Oh, absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
No worries. Now, before we start the podcast, I want to first share your vision for the future. You write, "My vision for the future is to be part of a society where all differences are celebrated, where girls can learn to be smart, confident women who lead with compassion and kindness and exemplify courage and strength." It's a really, really great vision you've got there.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, hearing it back actually like that is really quite inspirational for myself. But no, that is really how I feel that we can and should be raising young girls for the future. I just feel that we can, and there's been a lot of work that's being done to help empower young women, but I feel we're still not doing everything we possibly could.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, your book's amazing. I have read it, and having a young girl myself, not quite yet an adolescent, she's only nearly one, but I can understand where you're coming from as well. Take us back to where it all started. Let's even fast forward back to your earliest sort of years on how you got onto this sort of particular field. Take us back to your teenage years and how it sort of unfolded from there. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So. Without going into a whole long story about my entire life, basically the last my teenage years were filled with, or my childhood was filled with lots of lovely memories with family home and all sorts of great things. I am an eldest of three, and sadly we had the rug pulled beneath our feet when our mum was diagnosed with cancer. So I was 13 when I lost my mum, who was my role model, my mentor, my best friend, really. And I think having teen years without her was tough. There's no doubt about it. I certainly did struggle with the idea of not having her as my support network. So I think that's always been a thing. And I think I always wanted to go into medicine. I had a real love for science, and I wanted to do what I could do to cure cancer, so no other child was ever going to face what we went through and ever lose somebody that they loved like I did. It never really transpired like that, and I think life is an interesting thing. You can plan something all you like, and then it may not happen as you think. So it didn't happen that way for me. I didn't get into med school despite all my hard work and all my effort and trying to get all the grades to get into med school. I never made it. Felt like a failure, didn't know what I was going to do. I went off and had a year out where I was doing a bit of traveling and ended up back in India, spent some time with my grandparents, and it was in that trip that I realized actually what I want to do is work with kids in education. So came back to Vancouver, which is where I'm from, trained to be a teacher, and whilst I was in my teaching training program, the Prime Minister of England was recruiting teachers from the Commonwealth because there were no teachers in London to teach in the schools due to all the issues around there. So I was recruited to teach in London, and never really taught in Canada for a very, very long time, but was hit with a real kind of whoa when I got to London, because it's a different place, a different education system. And then I spent years being a teacher in London, loved it, but always felt, gosh, like the school system is a little bit broken here, or are the children really, having such a hard time because of X, Y, Z. And I kept drawing on these experiences. I went from working in public sector to private sector. I've worked in single-sex schools. I've worked in mixed ed schools. And all of it was all incredibly instrumental in in informing me on what I feel young people are missing. I think the education systems are great, but there are lots of things that we're not doing right for them.
Yeah, and as we've spoken offline, we've got a bit in common. My wife's an expert teacher and actually taught in London as well, public schools, private schools, and obviously taught in Australia. You've taught in Canada and gone over to London. Yeah, great experiences from there. Talk a little bit about how then you got involved in the sort of the world of teaching, teenage girls and in empowerment with that. What was the shift on from teaching into female empowerment with Elevate? Where did that come from?
So you talk about my vision, and you read out my issue around my concern for children with differences. And I think one of the things that I retrained to do in the last 6 years of my teaching career was to become a teacher of children with any additional needs. And that was, again, propelled by my personal experiences. I think it often does come down to your personal passion and where you've learned to see some things from yourself and from a personal perspective as a mother. My son was diagnosed with a neurodiverse condition. He's got a few things, but one of them mainly is autism. And not having real experience of working with children with neurodiverse brains, I had no idea what I was doing as a mum. I was completely lost. And I thought, right, I've got a platform. I'm a teacher. I work with kids. There are lots of kids with learning difficulties out there. What can I do to help not just the children, but their families as well? So that's where it took me into working with kids that might have differences. Of course, that then led into a whole different type of world of differences. It's not just learning difficulties. It's difference in body shape, difference in skin colors, and difference in not fitting in. I mean, all sorts of things. And the more I looked at this, the more I realized how much the girls I was working with were affected in terms of their self-confidence, and then their low self-esteem and what it was doing to their academic careers, and then their social relationships, and then their relationships at home. Completely, magnifying everything because of their self-worth wasn't there. And yes, I learned lots of great techniques of how you can deliver the curriculum to children who learn with neurodiverse brains, and all of that made a big difference. But I think the thing that I reflected on the most was that it was the time and space that I gave them to be in my classroom, to believe in them, that I think made the biggest difference in their learning and their feeling like they could go back into their main classroom and deal with the challenge at stake. So I don't think you can solve anything with one solution, but I definitely felt that there was a void. And one of the things that I think that the school systems do, and I think it's important, obviously, but I think society as a whole plays into this, is that we're constantly chasing something else. And one of the greatest things I think people or parents should learn is that there's no trophy at the end of anything called life. There just isn't. Your kids will get where they need to get to with the right support, love, care, attention. But if we lose them in their formative years of adolescence and we don't get them to feel good about themselves, I think we're in danger of never letting them ever feel their full potential, because they'll always doubt themselves. And I think that's what really got me thinking about what is it that I can do to help young girls. And so I developed and started Elevate. From that thinking.
Well said. Yeah, thanks for sharing the story on that. Let's jump into the book. You don't mind if I just read the introduction a little bit, do you?
Not at all.
Yes, you're writing the book. Raising girls who are in early adolescence involves excitement and angst in equal measure. Their newfound independence and the desire to express their unique identities are critical at this stage. The worry and confusion parents experience at what is unfolding, though, can result in despair and or desire to keep their precious girls little and protected for as long as possible. It's our roles to prepare girls for the life that awaits, but our help can feel unwelcome when they think they already know everything. You deep dive into sort of the 5 methodologies that bring you talk about their superpowers and how girls have a superpower that we need to sort of let them unleash. And you focus on the work that you can do and explore in depth. And we'll talk about a little bit more, which is confidence, empathy, emotional intelligence, resilience, and kindness as well. Let's kick off the book, and you talk about sort of step 1, setting the scene, and why Elevate. So can you talk a little bit about the KWP, Knowledge, Wonder, and Power Framework, if you don't mind?
Not at all. So I thought long and hard about the 5 superpowers, and I really do believe that if we instill lots of confidence, we talk about empathy, and we get children to learn about learning perspectives, get their emotional intelligence up. And I think there's a lot of research out there that talks about great leadership and wonderful people in senior roles in lots of organizations that do well in their roles because of their high EQ levels. And that is something that we are looking for. But we are looking for it when they're in adult ages, and we don't give it to them we need to teach them that level. It's not easy just to get it on and off in its own. And I think the idea around kindness and resilience is just part of life. The knocks that they're going to get is huge. Now, I think what happens a lot of times, especially when parents rock up to a teacher or a tutor or any kind of person that's going to help their child, the immediate gut reaction for that child probably is to feel like I've been brought to you, or I'm getting extra help, or I'm being pulled out of lessons to work with Mrs. Anand, as I was known in the schools, because there's something wrong with me. And I hated that. I hated starting any lesson with a child that felt already off the back that they weren't good enough to be where they were. And I think the K part is where I really want to start the program off with the girls and their parents celebrating everything we already know about their child. And I think we don't spend enough time sometimes focusing on the strengths of our children. We're very good and very quick at picking up the things that they might be lacking. And I don't know if it's a human nature thing. I think, Einstein said this thing about, the fact that he could do 1,000 sums correctly, and then the one that he has incorrectly on the board, which is 9 times 10 is 91. That's the only thing anyone ever pointed out, was that he got that one. He said, but I've done all sorts of other things in the room today, and the only thing people are noticing is the one error that I've made. And I think that happens so profoundly in adolescence, where kids are constantly looking at what's wrong with them. So my idea is to start with positivity, and let's really shine a light on everything that's amazing about your child, about you, and let the daughters get involved and the girls get involved in this exercise with me, while their mum and dad are in the room as well. So we really, and also let the parents, who often think they've told their children that they think they're wonderful at this, that, X, Y, and Z, or that they think they're a wonderful sister, or they think they're a wonderful netball player, but actually maybe don't voice it enough. And the girls don't know this. So when they share each of their strengths, the Ks, it's a real lovely moment of bonding between the children and their parents. So that's what the K is. And the W stands for wonders and worries. So I kind of let the girls choose. They can talk about everything that they're worried about in their particular stage of life where they are. Are they worried about being liked? Are they worried? Some of them are worried about getting fat. Some of them are worried about their tests. Some of them are worried about the 11 plus. Some of them are worried about what they're going to do when they're 30. It's interesting to see what they're carrying in their minds. And they list all their wonders and their worries out. And that is what I inform the rest of my program and my time with the children with. So I spend the next sort of week or so looking at all the worries that the child has made clear to me about they have, and then I ask the parents to do the same exercise and on a separate piece of paper, and I kind of ask each of them to share. So mum or dad might share with their daughter saying, I worry about your safety. I worry that you don't think highly enough of yourself, or I worry that you're not getting enough sleep, or whatever it may be. And I take both of those things, and then I work them into the exercises that I do over the next set of the weeks that I work with their girls without the parents. And then I invite the parents at the end of the 6 weeks with the girls back into the room, and we unleash our power. And I ask the girls to share what tools they've learned, what strategies they've learned with me to try and address those worries that they listed at the start.
You talk about low self-esteem in the teen and tween world between the ages of sort of 9 and 14. Talk to a little bit about sort of low self-esteem and how as parents we should reassure our kids exactly what you said with their superpowers and what they're good at. And sometimes we don't acknowledge the good, but we're so easy to pick up on the negative. Give us as parents, what are some things we could do to sort of elevate our kids low self-esteem into high self-esteem?
Sure. I think there's a lot of things that we can put into place. I think one of the things that we forget as they're growing up and they become a little bit moody, and they might have a slight negative attitude towards parents, particularly because they want to push their parents away, mostly because they are trying to form their own identities away from their parents. So it becomes a bit of a tricky time for parents. And I think some parents take the approach that, well, if I become super friendly and pally with my children, that will be a great way to bond with them. I think teens need boundaries, and I think they need to understand that there are consequences for breaking any rules that you might set. So I do think that they thrive on having those clear boundaries. They have to be clear, and they have to be set at a time where I think families are calm, happy, and able to talk about things. And then I need parents to be able to give their children consequences that they're going to follow through on. Otherwise, all of the exercises don't really make sense. So I think being patient with your teen and your tween is incredibly important, even though it's so hard. I'm in that world right now. I know I talk about it at work and then I have to practice it myself. And I promise you, hand on heart, it takes a lot. And I think parents also have to be kind on themselves, because we are navigating a world that didn't exist before us. So our default system as parents is often to do what our parents did with us, or go the other way and say, well, I'm definitely not doing what my mum and dad did with me. I'm absolutely going to parent in a different style. But that was all pre-social media and the digital age. And we've never had an example of what to do when children are struggling with mental health concerns and self-esteem concerns that have come out of, and there's no denying it, there's lots of positives about social media. I'm not here to ban or to dismiss the advantages that come with the world that we live in, but there are lots and lots and lots of cases and so much evidence to suggest that, particularly in those early teen years when the girls are developing their brains and the prefrontal cortex is still learning how to get it to its adult brain, that we can impact some of the neurotransmitters and the wiring around it for them to make some serious damage to the way they think about themselves.
Yeah, and in the book you go deep on girls and social media and understanding the science of dopamine addiction that can be difficult as well, and how that relates into self-harm and suicide in girls begin to rise. You talk about a stat that rates for girls aged 15 to 18 were up 62%, while 10 to 14 is 189% between that was 2010 and 2015. So I can only imagine what it is now. And that goes into my next question, which is basically recently discussed global beauty standards. Can you talk about how the impact of social media, dopamine addiction, beauty standards in girls whose brains are still developing and don't understand that, as adults, we can clearly look down on kids and say, that might not be correct, but they live in their own, not only world in their head, but their peer group, and how real that is for them in terms of trying to, global beauty standards are not correct, and how you talk about falling in love with your own skin and your own superpowers as well. Can you sort of talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. I think girls or children at school in our generation, if there was a bad day, you'd come home and you could spend some time with your parents or your TV or whatever it was, and your books, and go out for a bike ride or whatever you might be doing, and then start with a fair pair of fresh eyes the next day, and perhaps the problem that felt so big the day before isn't so big at school the next day. The trouble is with social media and giving children devices and having all the tech on all the time is that there's no break for that. Children don't ever switch off, and therefore they're constantly online because they don't want the FOMO thing. They don't want to miss out on what their peers are doing. And you can remember that. You don't want to not be connected to the world that everybody else is connected to. So a lot of parents aren't around. They're busy working. Of course, in the pandemic was another big factor in this, because they weren't seeing their kids, their friends in person. So extra allowances on screens was given so that children could connect on gaming sites and TikToks and whatever else they use to be social. And I think that's what that's done, is led to intense amount, and probably way more than is healthy amount of time scrolling mindlessly on social media and feeding our brain information at that impressionable age of what they think is the right thing to do and how to look and how to be. And I think the whole selfie culture and the idea of being on show all the time is partly what has created this terrible cycle of events for these young girls. So I think you're right. It is down to the big organizations to think about who they're putting on to the covers of these magazines. Well, it's not magazines now. It was magazines. For these young girls, it's who are the stars on their social media squares, who are the girls that they're looking at in their grids, and how are we portraying beauty. Is that really what we want? Do we not want girls to feel that their self-worth comes from within, from their superpowers, from their ability to be a good friend, from their ability to be a fantastic thinker, a curious learner, instead of looking into a camera a certain way or having a certain pout or a certain body type.
Yeah, and I think we didn't have filters back in those days as well, and I can damn sure tell you that the clothing industry wasn't as provocative that it is now, and it's ridiculous that what some teenage girls dress up as. It's way too much, and I don't think it's good at all for not only parents but society as well. That young girls have been so sexualized by clothing companies, makeup companies, and all the rest of stuff too. It's a damn shame. One of the little tips you talk about in the book is one of your top tips for parents is to set up a contract with your tweens. Can you talk about setting up a contract, like a social media contract or just an agreement? Can you talk a little bit about that and some tips that parents can use to sort of instill that into their relationship with their children?
Yeah, I find this a useful way of having clear understanding, because what we can't do, and it's completely personal to each family, is dictate everybody's moral values. And one child who gets a device at age 10 may not be in a family that whose parents' rules follow that. So I think the idea of a contract is something that is decided and signed by both parties, i.e. the children and the parents, but it becomes a personal family contract where you're not looking at what child XYZ down the road is doing, or what your cousins are doing, or even, because it can be a real comparisonitis thing where the kids are really constantly saying, well, so-and-so does this and I want to be able to do this. And I think if you give children some agency and you do let them take part in that conversation and allow them the case of presenting everything that they think they should be having at this age, and then telling you why, and then earning those rights. So I think there should be time limits, and there should be times in the family where devices are off, or if, for example, drinking is a big no-no for parents in one particular family, and they want their children to be able to go to parties, but they don't want them to pick up the alcohol. How do you come to these conversations? Because if the child comes home drunk and you lose your mind in that moment, it's not great for the child and it's not good for you, and you haven't really achieved anything. But if you like the whole idea around Elevate is preventative education. So if you talk before they get to these stages, even though it feels ludicrous to talk to a 13 or 14-year-old about alcohol, I think actually setting those messages in and talking about what your moral compass is, what your family's expectations are, and I mean everybody in the family that is there caring for the child. So if that's mum, dad, stepdad, whoever else is in that family dynamic, should all be on a clear page and take the opportunity before you get to those moments where they say to you, mum, dad, there's a party this weekend, or mum, dad, it's my 13th birthday, I want an iPhone 12 Pro, or whatever they might want to have. Instead of breaking their heart or then feeling guilt or shame as a parent saying, well, everyone else's kids has got this and we did. If you preventatively and proactively have these conversations before the child's 13th birthday, or before the child gets to invitations to a house party, then you're already at a clear place, and you hopefully build this idea of trust with your child. And the child hears mum and dad care. Mum and dad want me to be safe, and I want to be safe, because no teen really wants to be in trouble either. They might act it in front of their friends and their peers, but genuinely they are also as frightened as everybody else about the world in front of them, and they're also learning all this kind of new social norms. So they're also looking for some guidance. And I think they may never tell you that, but I think secretly, I know actually secretly, that they take a lot of benefit from having somebody looking out for them and saying, I trust you. I want you to be at this event, or I want you to go to this disco, but I want you to know that this is how we designed our contract. Here's your reminder. This is what we decided. And if you break this contract, here are the consequences.
Yeah, well said. And in the book, you talk about the importance of mentorship and role models. We as parents are their role model, and it's not what you say, it's what you do. And they pick up on what you do more than what you say. So in terms of social media contracts, as adults, we should be showing them that, hey, it's okay to have FOMO, fear of missing out, meaning you can turn your device off, you don't have to upload, you can be off and you can tune out, and the importance of sort of being with yourself without the social media device as well, especially as a family too. Yeah, so thank you for sort of expanding and touching on that as well. In the book as well, you also talk about redefining happiness. So talk about sort of the emotional states of how we can redefine some of those feelings of being the kids grumpy, lazy, annoyed, irritated, self-absorbed and emotional, and the importance of sort of changing that inner pattern of what you define as happiness is actually just a normal part of day-to-day growing up as well. So can you talk about the emotional side of sort of teenagers as well?
Sure. I think it's tough. I think nobody talks about the idea of grief for parents when their little girl becomes a preteen and then a teen. And the little girl is also a bit confused. And I think we forget how difficult this period is for both sides. And I think those images of them playing in the swings or in the parks and in the swimming pools and just laughing and being as smiley little girls most of the time are the images that we hold on to and we stick with because we created this amazing creature and we want to be with that lovely little girl for the rest of our lives. And suddenly you get to one morning and you really don't know when it happens and they're just the grumpiest, most unhappy people. And I think our expectations of our girls is I've just made you breakfast, or I've just taken you to school, or I spent all weekend running around taking you from XYZ. There's no appreciation and you're just miserable and you're being really rude. And I think that can create a really acrimonious sort of environment in the house because the girls are getting to a place where they cannot think beyond themselves. Yet our parents, as parents, all we're doing is literally everything for our children. So that kind of reminder and that understanding, because it comes out of nowhere, people may talk about it and say, oh yes, teen years are hard, but actually the ins and outs of that aren't so great or clear. And partly that's just because of the actual time mums and dads and carers and nannies don't spend with other mums of teen girls. The natural things around play groups, music groups, having those opportunities at school gates, because nobody takes a teen into school anymore and you don't hang out as a mum waiting. So you don't realize that you're all going through this. So this kind of having a network around you of other carers is also really important, I think. But the idea that we want our teens to be happy because we've done so much for them is almost impossible. And then expecting our teens, and I think there's a fine line here. It is important, obviously, to look out for signs if you think your child is genuinely so different to how they used to be that you worry that there's a medical issue around their health and their mental health and their anxiety levels are gotten so severely out of their character, then I think seeking professional help is obviously definitely warranted, and having a word with their teachers and their pediatrician would be really advisable. But I mean, in general, I think if they go from 1 minute being quite grumpy, the next minute to being really cheery, and you can't work out what just caused that, just to have that patience that the hormonal levels of change in their body at the moment is so all over the place that they actually have no rational control over it because their brain is still being reconstructed.
Yeah, and I think teaching children as well, you talk about the power of sort of confidence and growth mindset in the book with, the book on Carol Dweck, and, self-belief, helping girls shift the way that they think is about fostering a growth mindset. And with a growth mindset, you can basically show them that their inner voice could be a force of sort of championship. And if we teach our children to change the language in those built-in thought patterns, we can increase their confidence. Can you talk a little bit about confidence and how we should, teach our children about growth mindset? Because as you said, they're still developing, they're still growing, and they're not quite there yet.
Yeah, and I think it's important not to be labelled. I think it's quite dangerous when you get put into an A team, B team, C team, or you get put into the top set, middle set, bottom set of a subject. What happens, I think, quite quickly is that we start to internalise, well, I'm not good enough to be in the top set, or I'll never make the A team for football or hockey or whatever that is they're trying out for, or a play, or the choir, whatever it might be. There are lots of extracurricular activities out there where you have to audition for, or you have to, without even, teachers pointing it out, it's really obvious to the children where they might rank. And I think the idea of ranking is really tough. But what I like kids and parents and teachers to do is to remind children that this is not forever. This doesn't define you. What your 11 plus results are is not going to form the adult that you become. It's the attitude that you have towards learning, towards failure, to making mistakes, towards any of the things that might give you knocks back. It's the resilience that you're building every time you feel like you haven't got something right that's going to allow you to grow in confidence. So giving them that ability, that self-belief to get back up from the fall, which is that one of the other superpowers is the resilience part of it, and actually getting their the neuroscience behind the kids, right? Neuroplasticity is a really hugely proven science that our brain is malleable. We can expand it. We can absolutely grow it, and let girls understand that just because today in this cohort, in this tiny school, in this place in the world is huge. There are lots of children out there, and you are doing really well in lots of areas. And if you're not doing well in math today, it's not like you're not going to do well in maths tomorrow. And I use maths just because girls and maths and science seem to be a real sticking point with lots and lots of families that I work with. But that isn't, that it could be anything. My point is, if we keep using the right language and say, I'm not good enough yet, or I haven't got my A yet, and we can remind them that with hard work, commitment, dedication, that you will get where you need to. You just need to be very focused and determined and have a game plan. Let's plan this out. I'm not saying that just manifesting an A is going to make an A come, or if you use the word I'm going to get an A tomorrow, it may work, but it might not be the only. What I will tell you though is, if you keep telling yourself that one day I'm going to get an A in this subject, and that message keeps coming in, you are then going to be determined to want to work towards getting that A. You might go for extra help at the end of the week and go and find your math tutor and say, I didn't get that, or you might ask for some extra revision papers, and all of that extra practice that you put into it might result in an A sooner than later.
Yeah, it's funny that you just said the word yet. I just interviewed a guy named Trevor Lynch who wrote the book Yes You Frickin' Can, and yeah, he talks massively about the power of that 3-letter word, which is yet. And we need to be comfortable with yet, because even as kids, they're not there yet, and as adults, we think we've arrived at the yet, which is a fixed mindset. But no, we're still growing ourselves. So I think teaching kids early on that just because, as you said, you're not good at math yet, it doesn't mean that later on in life you can't go back to that and relearn that. I was terrible at English, and now look at me, I'm still terrible at English, but through practice and hard work, I'm still getting there. I'm not there yet, but I'm still growing through the English language. In the book, you talk about a really touching story about a guy named Ali who lost his son tragically, and he ended up writing the book Soul for Happy as well, and the power of neuroplasticity and the power of positive thought patterns. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so Ali is a young boy who passed away very, very suddenly and tragically for a routine operation of an appendix. And his father was Mo Gaudat, the man that I interviewed for my podcast. And he wrote the book Soul for Happy, and he's written lots of other books since as well. But in that book, he talks about expectations versus reality. And if we set the equations correctly with our children, we can get happy, but you have to think about what it is that you're expecting. And if you constantly look for negative expectations around, and you constantly look for things to blame, and you're constantly blaming yourself as the victim of an event, then happiness, and you choose to sit in that suffering, then that is going to be an unhappy life, an unfulfilled life for you. But you have a choice to look at a situation that didn't go your way, think about what the outcomes are, and think about, well, it didn't go how I wanted to, but what did it teach me? And if you take that as a lesson, then you will be granted happiness. And he did that with the whole process of losing his son and the grief that it brought him, and how he's decided to use his the rest of his life as a way to go ahead and teach other families and adults and people all around the world about how we can strive for happiness, even when things don't go your way. I think we think that we will be happy when, I will be happy if, I will get happy if I get this X, Y, and Z. But actually, You won't, and nor will your teen. If your teen wants the next pair of Jordans and says, "Mom, I'll be thrilled when I get that," or "Dad, can you please buy me the next latest Xbox or gaming console? I'll be so happy." That's not the truth. They're not happy in that. What they have to be happy in is in themselves. And when we give children that message and we really teach them about things not always going to happening the way they need them to happen all the time, because life just doesn't work like that, then we are going to set them up for what is true happiness and being content.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah, it's something that we need to instill in our kids and let them understand that happiness is a choice. It's not. It's really a conscious choice. We sort of waiting for happiness to come about unconsciously and through default, which it never does. It's literally it's a choice. Moving on to empathy, you talk about in the book empathy and how too many girls ignore the importance of looking outwards to feel what other people are experiencing and feeling, and they're sort of always stuck in their sort of frame of reference. Can you talk about empathy and young girls on why it's so hard for them to show empathy and the power of being empathetic to other people as well?
Yeah, of course. I think part of it is science and nature. Because of where they are in their adolescent development, it's very difficult for them to think beyond themselves. I think that's true. So I'm not trying to diminish any of that, but I do think that the whole culture around mean girls and why there's even in females that are adults, there's this kind of women pitting each other against each other, and the competitiveness that girls can create starts really young. And my whole view around empathy is to broaden girls' minds, to think about everybody else and learn about perspective. And I know we can do that when we travel. I know we can do a little bit of perspective learning when we, try different foods, or we go out and explore different places. But I think sometimes all we have to do is look around the playground or the netball court or the classroom to see why somebody else might not be feeling so great today. Is there something I can do possibly? Can I put myself in their shoes and understand what it might feel like to be the only person that doesn't have a partner, or to be the only person that doesn't have a friend to sit with in the dining hall? And I think if we start, and the other real mission I have with the empathy module in my lessons with the girls is teaching them how to be upstanders. So it's one thing to have those feelings themselves and to say, okay, yes, I do feel for that child. I think that child's having a hard time, where their parents are going through a really messy divorce and this girl is not happy at the moment. Can I show her something? Can I do something to maybe alleviate some of the pain that she might be in? I don't think lots of girls have that tool. And I think the other thing is we can't stop the bullying unless we start teaching girls how to be upstanders for each other. So how do we get girls to understand that if you see something that isn't right, how do you stand up for the other girl without getting yourself into a big mess? Because I know girls love drama, and I don't want to create a big scene, but I do want girls to understand that there are ways in which you can show up for your friend or for this girl, even if she's not your friend, and create a sense of solidarity with other girls, so that there is this wonderful sea of females that we raise that want to stand up for each other.
Yeah, and that's well said what you said. And yeah, just understanding that, it's not just about them, and it's the bigger world as well, can get outside of their head and really help by being more empathetic to another person's plight and experience as well. In the book, you talk about active listening and sort of the 4 types of listening, which is appreciative listening, empathetic listening, comprehensive listening, and critical listening as well. And you also mention a great little quote by Simon Sinek, which says, "Hearing is listening to what is said. Listening is to hearing what isn't said" as well. Can you talk about the power of sort of active listening, not just from listening, us parents listening to our kids, but also kids teaching them how to actively listen as well?
Yeah, and I think that's a battle many parents probably have with teens. But I think, again, like you said in earlier, we are their scaffolding, we are their role models. So if we demonstrate good listening skills, then hopefully they start to model that with their friends, and that they model that with other people. Active listening is great eye contact. It is dropping the phone. It is not trying to talk. And obviously with teens, it's slightly different, because I do say that it's not easy talking to teens face to face. They don't really like that kind of interrogative chat. They actually like to be side to side. So if you're cooking and they're sort of standing next to you, I don't think that's inappropriate, but I do think that if they come to you with a problem, or they want to talk to you about their friendship issues or whatever they might be sharing with you, that you might be really busy, and most parents are, they're very busy, but at that moment, try and put everything away, or say to them, I really want to listen to what you're saying properly, but I need to finish this email, or I need to finish this phone call, or I need to finish putting the dinner on, and then can we just talk in 10 minutes? And I think, and then really showing them that you want to listen is important. And I think not having any judgment. So when they do share something with you, even your body language, even your eyes, even the way you might be looking or alarmed when they share something about their friends, just have done this X, Y, and Z, and you're like, no, they haven't, really? And you think you're not, showing those emotions on your face, but you are. And they pick up on that like that, and they will shut down. So I think active listening is genuinely taking in everything that your child has said to you and letting it sit. Let them talk without you giving any judgment, and possibly not even giving any advice, unless they ask for it. And then that's the hardest part, because I think what we all want to do is make everything better for our lovely little tween and teen, and we want to say, well, I think the best thing for you right now is X, this, and you should definitely go to school tomorrow and do this. And actually that is the other thing that will shut them right off from you. So just listen and just be active, be present, be really, really reassuring, and then really show your appreciation for them sharing what they did, so that they keep coming back to you. And hopefully they'll do that with their friends as well.
Yeah, parenting's an effort. It's a daily effort that requires, new thinking, new skills, new challenges, new tactics. For me as a parent, I've got a 3-year-old boy and a 1-year-old girl, and here I am talking to you already about sort of adolescence and what am I going to do when she's grown up. But it's a daily sort of it's a daily grind for parents to be on their A game with parenting, and also those new tactics, and giving space to your child when you said active listening. No need to respond back with what you think. Just give them the space to talk and be that person that you listen, instead of you listening to respond. You listen just for the sake of listening as well, and getting that off their chest. Segueing to the next important thing, you talk about the power of sort of the importance of journaling and mindfulness. Now, I'm a massive journal person myself, and one of the things I loved in the book, you talked about encouraging greater self-reflection and improving emotional intelligence. And one of the tips you write was, or one of the stories, one of the girls had problems sleeping, and one of the things was to journal before going to bed just dumps the mind of all the shit of the day onto paper, and get a better night's sleep, and you feel less stressed and relaxed as well, which I do that, daily or every second day. Can you talk about the importance of sort of journaling, mindfulness, and how that helps with sort of greater emotional intelligence as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that particular story that you talk about, I think you're absolutely right. That little girl struggled with sleeping because her mind was just racing with so much anxiety around what had happened and what is to come the next day. And she just couldn't get her mind to rest and get into a place of getting good night's rest. And that worked beautifully for her, because she was able to dump her worries out, and they were parked, and they didn't go away, because you can't really make them all go away. But I think even when you've taken them out of your head and you've put them onto paper, that physical act already alleviates how much you're holding. So giving your brain that rest by writing it out, drawing it out. You don't have to, not lots of girls don't like to write, but they might like to draw. So even doodling the worries out and putting out what they've done in order to express themselves in a better way. No one has to read it. It has to be, I always tell my parents, make sure that you make the girls understand that it's not something that anyone else has to read it. So it can be a very, very personalized and confidential thing for the girls if that makes them feel better about it. But giving them the time to do that is really important because, and you'll know this, Michael, as your kids get older, because you start to lose your evenings. And often what we want to do is like get on with our own as adults. So when they're little, they go to bed, and then you and your partner hopefully get some time to crash on the sofa with Netflix. But what happens as they get older is they don't go to bed. And so what we want to do is, as soon as their homework is done, we want them to go to sleep. But I do think 5 to 10 minutes where they get to journal and they unwind and the devices are off and you're in a kind of a dim lighting in your room, and you teach them the power of sort of just breathing through their day, talk about the things that were great, because it's always important to shine a really good light on anything that happened in the day that was also really great, and remembering that we did have some positives today. Yes, there's a really big worry and I've got a really great big test tomorrow and I'm really scared I'm going to sleep in and not make my bus and not get my coach, and I'm going to miss this test, I'm going to fail. All the things that creep into their little brains is part of it, but it's really important to teach them the skill of looking at the positives and then also channeling some of their anxiety, their worries, anything that is keeping them up at night into writing is another really great tactic.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so powerful of just emptying the mind. Even like you talk about resilience and facing hardships and, you know, those bad days that we all go through, you know, they do end. So the only hardest day was yesterday. That's the motto of the US Army, but really, really good one, because, you know, yesterday can't hurt you if it's gone. You wake up a new day, it's fresh. Yeah, clean your mind just like you would shower or brush your teeth. You need to just empty what's going on through there. So in the book, you talk about resilience, teaching your kids how to cultivate resilience as well. Do you want to touch on some tips or exercises as parents that we can teach our young girls and boys how to cultivate resilience in life?
Yeah, you bring up a good point. A lot of these things work for both girls and boys, but I think I focused a lot of my research on what was happening with teen girls and tween girls. So the book does work across. So if anyone listening to this has boys, I think there are tips and then that would work for them as well. For me, the idea around resilience, and again, I think the idea that because we love our children, and that's, you know, no parent will say that they don't, we never want to see them hurting. It's very difficult. And our instinctive reaction to most things in life is to protect our child and do as much as we can for them. And that works really beautifully when they're little, you know, you give them, but actually I think there is advantages even in letting them go when you have to let your hand off the bike and you have to let the training wheels go and you watch them cycle off with the two-wheeler bike. And that's a really big moment for all parents. I think, teen and tween years are going to be filled with lots of mistakes that your kids make. But allowing them those opportunities to make those mistakes is hugely important. And I think if we don't do that and give them space to fail, and I hate the word fail, so I'm not going to use the word fail, but to not get it right the first time is a massively important step in getting children to be resilient. So if we let them fall, great. I think that's wonderful. But where we come in, where I think the parents' role really is to teach them how we get up. And if we can do that as parents, we will really do our job to raise leaders and people in the world and kids that grow up to be adults that can face challenge without falling apart.
Yeah, well said. I mean, there's so many more great things that you write in the book as well, and we could touch on. I'm sure we've sort of run over time as well, but one of the things that we should teach our kids as well is the power of sort of diet, physical exercise, and sleep, and how that three as a triangle will improve your mental health, your physical health, you know, your emotional health as well. And you know, if we don't teach our kids to eat well, sleep well, you know, or do any exercise, they're going to, their mental health is going to suffer, which then they're outwardly going to express that as well. So can you talk about the power of us as parents on, I mean, I know they bounce back quick and kids can sort of go with shit food, shit sleep and no exercise and still feel good, but talk about how we should encourage, you know, a healthy diet, getting the exercise and just get into good habits of sleep as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think all kids should be kids and they should enjoy whatever kind of food that they're enjoying on occasion. I don't have any strict rules around diet in that way, particularly around girls and body confidence. I do like to encourage girls to feel good with what they eat, and that is definitely part of it. But what are those foods? What makes you feel good? And I think if we don't give our children the feel good foods and the sleep, and then the right amount of screen time to affect their mental health, then their ability to deal with challenge, we've already set them at a disadvantage. So when something is going wrong, because they're not at their fittest and their strongest, then their reaction to challenge will be less than their best. And if we don't give our children the best chance at fighting those days where things are going badly, then we are setting them up for a terrible catastrophe as they become adults, really, because then that is when tantrums, and you've seen adults have tantrums when things don't go their way. And we don't want that for our children. We really want them to be able to take situations that are in front of them and put a calm, cool head and make sure that they deal with it in the right way. Of course, kids are going to lash out, and of course, parents have to do that too. But again, if we model that as a healthy family, what makes us feel good? Does sleep makes us feel a bit, being sleep deprived? And I will say this really openly with my children. I didn't sleep well last night. I feel a little grumpy. Excuse me if I was short with you this morning. It's important for us to model that. So a few weeks later, when my daughter had a bad night's sleep and she was extremely rude to her grandma the next day, and when they were visiting, she had the language and the know-how to say, I'm really sorry that came out like that. I didn't sleep well last night. And I think that can only come when we share the same vulnerability with them. So I think those are important things. And I think if we continue to remind ourselves that being healthy and strong, and yes, we do that for physical reasons, and we do that for a way of living a long and beautiful life, but education's the same way. If we educate our body to think about the right foods and think about how rest can make a big difference, how having breaks can make a big difference, then we are also setting our brain up for a healthy long life.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, I like how you said, I didn't have enough sleep and I felt a bit grumpy. My wife's like that every day, and sometimes myself. But yeah, teaching children the language pattern as adults, and say, you know what, I lashed out. My emotional response was that because of X, Y, and Z. They can use that language pattern as well. Just the last topic before we wrap up, I want to talk about sort of celebrating differences. As parents, or just as anyone, we all want to fit in. We all want to be the same. We all want to look cool, this and that. But at the end of the day, what makes us unique and great are our differences. Can you talk about sort of the power of celebrating differences, which includes, diversity, equality, and inclusion matters, but just with celebrating differences in our kids as well? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think the fact that there is nobody else that has the same unique DNA pattern as you makes you special, right? There is nobody, be you, because there's nobody better. I think if we give these messages to children and ask them to think about why their unique characteristics make that day extra special, because they bring this to you, reminding them that they matter because of their difference, not in spite of their difference. All of that kind of language around, I think like this, or I watched a show where one of the girls who had dyslexia was put in a special classroom for spelling help, but she had the most incredible superpowers in terms of her strengths in creatively visualizing things, so she could see things and draw 3D models in a way that nobody else in the class could. And I think really, really honing in on everything you can do, not what you can't do, but also realizing that difference, that you can't spell maybe as quickly as everybody else because of your spelling deficiencies or whatever the way your brain is working, that doesn't make you less than. That makes you extra special. And how do we celebrate that? Because of the wiring of your brain, you can do this. So let's look at that and let's really celebrate you for that. And I think really teaching children to compliment other girls, share that kindness, put that into the world, because it's a ripple effect of what we can create if we keep continuing the language around, hey, I just noticed that amazing, cool hairdo you've done, and not doing the exact same hair as everybody else will make you pretty special.
Yeah, and as adults, we understand that what makes us different and unique, and then applying the time, energy on our personal superpowers is what makes us great in our careers, our personal lives, professional lives, and what makes us our unique DNA, because no one else is like that as well. To wrap up the podcast, thank you so much for writing the book. Where can people find out more about yourself, your book, and the platform Elevate as well? And let's say someone listening right now is like, how do I get in touch with you, or how can I deep dive into what you do? Can you talk about sort of what you do professionally and how you can help parents and kids, teens out there as well?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so the website is Elevate, so www.elevate-ra.com. You can buy the book on Amazon across the world, so .com.ca.sg, wherever you might be. It's also available on Waterstones and the Book Depository. If you wanted to get it off my website, you can also do that. And my socials is at elevate.ra, and I'm Ramita Anand on LinkedIn. You can pretty much find me anywhere there. And if you are interested in running the mentorship program with me, I run it online. So if you are based in Australia, some of your listeners might be, but I know you've got a global audience. But so wherever you are, I work with children around the globe, which is one of the most beautiful things about what I get to do. And I make the time differences and things work, but it's online if you want it to be. But if you're based in London and you'd like to do it in person, I also work from home and run workshops for children and parents at home.
Beautiful. Thank you for writing this book and your life experience as well, and sharing the stories as well. So Ramita, thank you very much for being a guest on the Best Book Bits podcast. And to my audience out there, go follow her socially, check out her book, and if you're interested in the mentorship program, check that out as well. So thank you very much for being a guest. Have a great day, and I'll speak to you soon. Okay.
Thank you, Michael, for having me. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you.
No worries at all. All right.